Good morning. Great to see you again. Did you have a great night? I heard great things about faces, yes? Well, welcome to the first lecture. And the first lecture is exactly that. The first lecture you'll hear from a Stanford professor, and it's a lecture that will look at what it means to be here and in Stanford studying the liberal or having a liberal education at Stanford. And we're pleased today that our speaker is Professor Alex Nimrod. And Alex is the Carl and Marilyn Thoma Provincial Professor in Arts and Humanities and in the Department of Art and Art History. He, previously to coming to Stanford, he was at Yale, where he was the Vincent Scully Professor in the Department of History of Art. Now, before that, he was here back at Stanford from 92 to 2000. And he left us, and we are so glad that he's back. He's the son of the poet Howard Nimrod, and he earned a BA in English and Art History from the University of Vermont in 1985, graduating Phi Beta Kappa and cum laude. He then went on to receive his master's and doctorate in the history of art from Yale University. He's a scholar of American art, and he writes about the presence of art, the recollection of the past, and the importance of the humanities in our lives today. He is the author of 5 books and numerous essays and exhibition catalogs. His books include Wartime Kiss, Acting in the Night, Macbeth and the Places of the Civil War, which won the Choice Outstanding Academic Book Award, Icons of Grief, Val Lewitton's Homefront Pictures, The Body of Raphael Peale, Still Life and Selfhood, 1812 to 1824, Frederick Remington and the Turn of the Century America, again, winner of the Outstanding Book Award from Choice in 1996. As a teacher, he's passionate, engaged, and known as a wonderful teacher and lecturer. He taught one of the most popular courses at Yale, his Survey of Western Theater. And he was a legend there, that students felt they couldn't graduate from Yale without taking Alex's course, Professor Nimrod's course. And here he's brought that course to Stanford and actually will teach that Survey of Western Art this fall. So it's a course if you haven't signed up for already, you may want to take this quarter or before you graduate from Stanford. His other courses include such courses as American Photographs, American Encounters, Colonies to World War II, American Romanticism and British Art, American Art, the Visual and Literary Culture of the American Civil War, Picturing the Beast, the Animal in Art and Literature, and the Visual and Literal Culture of San Francisco. He's also taught film courses, the Visual Culture of American Homefront. So please give a round of applause to and welcome our speaker, our first lecturer, Professor Alex Nimrod.
May I have the PowerPoint? There we go, great. Thank you, Harry, for that nice introduction. It's really an honor to speak to you all on this occasion to give this first lecture of your Stanford careers. And on the screen is what I want to talk to you about. It's a picture that was once the most expensive painting in the world. And that was in 1961 when the painting by the Dutch artist Rembrandt came to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, which purchased it that year for a record sum. Outside the museum on Fifth Avenue, the crowds lined up to see it. In the newspapers, the cartoonists portrayed John F. Kennedy, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, French President de Gaulle, and other famous political figures of the day in the place of Rembrandt's bearded man with his downcast eyes. The picture was world famous. Back in New York, on Fifth Avenue, from the rain, from the sun, into the museum, the crowds came. And when they got up to the painting, they didn't get up to the painting because ropes cordoned off an area 20 by 40 feet around it, and an armed guard stood by to make sure order was maintained. What did those crowds make of the painting then and there back in 1961? Who knows? I can't say. It was a long time ago. But we can look now and say what we see. The man with his beard and his black hat and his black frock and with his peculiar flowing sleeves is all alone. Maybe Rembrandt painted him from a model, and maybe we can feel the painter's presence there as this man posed for him. There, hold it, just like that. But the feeling of the picture is very much of a person alone. Alone with his thoughts. Alone in a moment of communion, of connection with that object there on the table to the left. That object which is what? A sculpture of the chest and head of a man, a sculptural bust. Just a piece of rock, a piece of stone, but one that the man with his hand on his hip stares at and rests his other hand gently but firmly on top of. This man with one hand on his hip and the other on the sculpture is supposed to be Aristotle, the 4th century BC Greek philosopher, and the sculpture is supposed to show Homer, the 7th or 8th century BC Greek poet, long dead by Aristotle's time. So the introspection, the inwardness, the private reflection is about some kind of belief, some kind of imagination. Belief and imagination, because for Aristotle, the sculpture is not just a block of stone, not just some inert object from the past, but almost a living thing. Something he can put his hand on, can connect with, something that can be for him across the years a touchstone. And what is it about this sculpture that makes it a touchstone for him? Again, we don't know. The painting doesn't say. Rembrandt, making this picture in the year 1653, he didn't say either. Nothing. The painting is silent. But again, let's look. Maybe what Aristotle communes with most is Homer's variety as a poet. No, variety is not the word. Maybe he communes with Homer's range as a poet. No, range is not the right word. Maybe this is better. He communes with Homer's endless inventiveness, his infinite way of matching words to all kinds of human experience. Maybe that's what's a touchstone for him. Because Homer could give you blood and guts like you would not believe. His epic poem, the Iliad, is a famous catalog of the way people kill each other, the slicing and shattering and gut-spilling of war in thick detail, one battle scene after another, this, that, and the other warrior, page after page, biting the dust. But Homer could also give you, in those same pages, lyrical descriptions of beauty and tender emotion, like a description of the stars that shine so brightly on certain nights that the black sky around them seems to be a pure space breaking through, coming downward from heaven. Or another description of the gleam of Achilles' shield at night, a gleam that beheld from afar is like a single campfire that those on a ship see as they depart from home, see on the distant shore, not wanting to leave, a fire so familiar that from the ship in the night they can even recognize the familiar field from which the distant light shines, even as their ship is blown, maybe forever, over the wide ocean from that familiar shore of home. Going from home or returning home, Homer's inventiveness knows no bounds, as when Odysseus, in Homer's other epic poem, the Odyssey, after many years of hard travel and toil, finally lands at his home island of Ithaca, lands, Homer says, at a cove, a haven from the plunging surf, a cove overhung by two cliffs, a cove where, on the inmost shore, an olive tree extends its branches over the water, and where nearby there is a dusky cave, and within the dusky cave there are jars hollowed in the rock, jars where the bees bring their honey, and where, in this same cave, the mermaids weave fabrics as richly dyed as the deep sea, there in that cave where clear springs flow forever. That is home in the Odyssey. And through all this, all these scenes of tenderness and violence, Homer's creativity is flowing, changeable, first taking one shape, then another, because that creativity is like the god Proteus described in the Odyssey, Proteus who can take the forms of all the beasts and water and blinding fire. So poetry, so imagination, so words strung together in sentences and phrases, so they change, so they make what we see and, yes, who we are. Maybe that's what Rembrandt's Aristotle thinks about there by himself. They knew, too, in Rembrandt's Holland, that not just philosophy, not just poetry made for these moments, these touchstones for a person all alone, where a private reflection in that aloneness is the solidest gold of one's ongoing life. In this painting you're looking at here, made by Rembrandt's younger contemporary, the artist Yann Vermeer, a painter just starting out when he made this picture in the 1650s, we see a young woman reading a letter by the light of an open window. She reads the letter carefully, absorbed in whatever it says. The letter, more than just something she reads, is a rumpled strip of white that makes us look somehow, I don't know how, at the profile of the young woman's face. The letter gives that face its quiet and its grace all alone. And as she reads, look how her face doubles there as a reflection on the window glass. Doubles there as if when we are absorbed like her, all alone with our thoughts like her, we grow a second self, a soul, some more imperceptible, more immaterial version of who we are. That our reflections are the prism glow of the mind. And this is what we do when we are alone with our thoughts. These reflections are about the world, make no mistake. The woman alone in this Vermeer painting reads a letter as she stands before what is a vast map behind her. The backdrop for her solitude is a geopolitical universe. It conditions that map the geography of her mind. It suggests her world view. It tells us maybe of some distant land the letter she holds comes from. Sunshine from an unseen window soaks the wall, lights the nations, and glitters on her knuckles. She may be wealthy, she may be educated, yet the territory of her thought is not reducible to any of these things. The territory of her thought is maybe not the map at all, but the wall so lit up behind her that it seems almost not a barrier at all, but some clear, almost air, a sky for thoughts to float on, the mind alone. And these reflections are about money. Make no mistake about that either. The woman so quietly alone in this painting by Vermeer appears to weigh gold in the scales she delicately holds before herself. Commerce, riches, and quiet go together in this picture. And Aristotle, there in his private moment of pure brain, hand to the head of his stony idol of thought, his poet and his soul brother, even he fingers with his other hand, the left hand, a glittering gold chain that drops to his waist. That chain is so thickly painted, if you were to go to see the actual painting in New York, so raised up off the surface of the canvas in thick gobs of paint that, as it's been said, you could grate a nutmeg on it. So it is that that thick chain of gold and the sculpture in Rembrandt's painting are equally important. And so it's been said about this painting that Aristotle is either judging the separateness of the two spheres, otherworldly poetry and worldly value, On the one hand, this, on the other hand, that, or he's thinking about how these things relate, how they can both come together in one person. Vermeer's woman likewise weighs what? Is she weighing gold, like I said, or is there, as my colleague here at Stanford, Brian Wolf, says, in fact, if you look really closely, nothing at all in the pans of the scales, so that she is not weighing her riches, but actually steadying the balance itself, making it calm, making it still, searching for what Vermeer has the grace to know is a moment he can imagine we all might seek. That is, some state of balance, of poise, where the world held still, we can for a moment appreciate, even love, the weight of nothing at all, something that cannot be seen, named, or quantified. So it is that in Rembrandt's painting, the big blocky stone sculpture is both the solidest thing on earth, it must weigh a ton, and yet strangely light and floating there on that insubstantial surface of the light-filled table on which it rests. To think of what is solid and insubstantial, of what to you in a private moment is as solid as rock, and yet also so ephemeral, so light, so more than light, so weightless, that you cannot measure it, you cannot quantify it, that when you try to explain it, you are always in the position of the running back after the game trying to answer the reporter's question of what it was like to score that touchdown and trying to find the words, but knowing that inside the face mask, what happened was so private, so intensely personal, that even you yourself are not sure how it all transpired the way it did. To be always in that position, a little bit at a loss to explain it to others, yet living it deeply within yourself, so much that others do note and see and value this depth in you. Well, this is the stuff I think about and live by every day. So there's hope for that kind of inward thinking in our country, the United States of America today, right? Well, if I say maybe not, it's because mind and production, mind and output, mind and product have gone together in the United States since the country was founded, since even before it was founded, to judge by the picture on the screen. It's a painting of the American patriot Paul Revere, before the Midnight Ride, a few years before the American Revolution, and shown by the painter, a guy named John Singleton Copley, in his peacetime pursuit as a silversmith too, with an idea. Look at the gleam in his eyes. Revere has just had an inventor's aha moment. The light bulb in this picture has gone on, and the light bulb, in this case, is a teapot. And look at, on that table in front of him, the inscribing tools you can see there. Probably Revere's thinking of what to inscribe on the teapot he's made. He's just had a vision of what this inscription should be. But more than that, he's showing what would become, and still is, in this room today, this country's absolute connection between mind and invention, between the globe of the head and the globe of the product, between the gleams of the mind and the gleams of the shiny thing the mind makes, between the hand whose thumb looks like the spigot of the teapot and the teapot and the hand that holds it. All flows together, mind, product, hand, brain, connected in the gleam of an American inventive eye. This is Aristotle with his hand on that sculpture of Homer, only the philosopher is now an American genius of craft and entrepreneurial skill. And the poetic object in his hand is not the sculpted head of a poet, but a beautiful utilitarian device, real, substantial, and strong. And maybe that's why Rembrandt's painting does not look streamlined enough, why it looks old and dark by comparison. Copley's Paul Revere looks forward to our world. Rembrandt's Aristotle looks dreamily back to some other lost one. That's what you could say, but I don't agree. Rembrandt's state of mind, I feel, is with us all the time, though often unacknowledged. It's with us in those moments of inwardness, of truly being alone with our thoughts that any of us might have the good fortune to experience day to day, those moments when, unseen by others or unaware of being watched, we think of what moves us, of what we connect to, be it a person or a memory or a dream, and find the touchstones that tell others, without us even having to say a word, who we are. So, my younger daughter, age 9 now, at a secluded cove this summer, at a cove on a lake near where I went to college long ago, back east. At that cove, with me there watching, the responsible parent, but otherwise letting her do her thing, which for 90 minutes was a wordless investigation of the shore, its rocks, its weeds, little fish, and soaked driftwood. In her element, moving physically about, lost really in a trance, going on and on, my daughter. Me resisting my teacher's impulse to ask why and how and when and what, and just letting her be. There in a cove, a secluded cove, like what you see on the screen. A private space, a world unto itself that still gives us a view to some far shore. Or my older daughter, age 11, a fan of old movies. She watches them intently, so intently that it's the silver grain of these old black and white movies that I think of when I think of her sitting next to me watching one of these old films. So that all plots, all situations, all scenery, all that we can see on the movie screen are secondary, finally, to this fine silver grain, this play of pure light that is the fine silver grain of the mind, her mind, anyone's mind, really, anyone who is focusing, concentrating, or better, anyone who is immersed in what they are doing, who is so into it, an athlete would call it being in a zone, that they scarcely know that they are so absorbed. So please don't think for a moment that the world of this inwardness, what you see on the screen, is gone in old school. For it is a part of us, and even I often feel the best part of us, all of us, no matter how extroverted we may be. And the only danger, the only sorrow, is that we, myself included, should not feel it or seek it out more often, this way of secluding ourselves in the privacy of a reflection so that our horizons expand. But there's no excitement in it, right? Maybe there's some kind of quiet, studious pleasure, sure, but nothing more than that. The people who are out there surfing on the big waves, they're the ones who feel the breeze and the ocean and the tremendous weight and exhilarating force of the world in a way that the person by the fireside, writing a sentence, thinking a thought, can never know, right? Well, again, I'm not so sure. And look at Rembrandt's painting again. Rembrandt, to be a painter, to paint in his way, first had to look at, really stare at, the work of the most bombastic, extroverted painter there was in his time, maybe in any time, the Flemish painter named Peter Paul Rubens. Who was Rubens? Rubens painted giant, bold pictures of slashing violence and rippling flesh. The paint to this day on one of these pictures has the feel of an oil slick, like it was painted yesterday and not 400 years ago. And what did he show? Rubens did not turn down a scene of gruesome violence or of religious or military pomp, A martyrdom of this saint or that saint, sure. A baby in swaddling clothes surrounded by an entourage of kings and camels with clods of earth below and stars twinkling in the heavens above. That's what you want? Fine. The same scene lit by frothy torchlight and adorned with chubby cupids flying between the flames and the camels? No problem. That was his game, that was his pleasure, and he could paint a broad, sinewy back, giving this guy or that guy an almost superhero musculature, do it all in a morning, and then, as it's been said, get on his horse in the afternoon, happy with his morning's work, and not think another thought about it. Or he could paint hunters circling two wolves in a cyclone of fierce spears, the jagged edges menacing the beasts, and the wolves themselves, enraged, swiveling their heads and fighting back, one of them biting a spear in its mouth so that we see on that spear the reflection of its fangs amid the blood of its tongue. An eye that gleams, a mouth that shouts. This is a writer's list of some of the things you might see in a Rubens painting. Tangled hair, a bristling beard, a hand that grasps. Foam that lashes the beach, disorder in array, a breeze in light objects, or muddy water dripping through the meshes of a net. What Rubens could paint and how he could paint it is over the top. It's so over the top that I can't even show you one of his pictures in this lecture. It would spoil the mood. They're just too grotesque with fire and flesh, too cinematic in their explosive energy, too revolting even to me, and I love the guy. But Rembrandt knew his art well and took from Rubens all that excitement and used it, converted it into this picture of quietude. And where, you might say, where is the Rubens in this? Well, I think of those strange flowing sleeves of Aristotle, sleeves light-colored that ripple and billow, that seem like ocean surf at high tide crashing to the shore, sleeves that convey, as rippling clothing often does in paintings, a state of excitement, of exhilaration. Here, the exhilaration of thought. And look at that block of expressive, agitated cloth that connects Aristotle's body to the face of Homer, there as it hangs off his right arm, that outlines Homer's profile, that makes a physical bond between them. Vermeer is exhilarated too. His sleeves ripple, though in a different way. The fashions change. The fashions of thought change. But the cascading flow of mental excitement, what it looks like, and really what you are here for, not just today, but in the next 4 years, that never goes out of style. And maybe that's because the energy of that excitement, when it is genuine, is as great as a force of nature, as a high tide. Now, Vermeer's excitement is going out there. We get that extroverted feeling about it, right? He's looking out into our space. He's got a dream, a vision. He's going places even before the midnight ride. Aristotle's excitement, by contrast, seems all contained. What happens in his study stays in his study. And you know, maybe that is the way it is with private reflection, that never sees the light of day, that's never meant for anyone except ourselves. It does not result in products and declarations and clear-cut identities, but rather is some mystery, some weird tidal force within all of us that's powerful, relentless, unstoppable, the darkness and privacy of a personal experience that cannot be shared. Be assured that all of you have those experiences even before your first day at Stanford. But what if our quiet, what is inmost within us, could be shared? What if for us today here much, in fact, depended on this matter of sharing what we genuinely and deeply believe, of not leaving it in the dark? So a story. On the screen is a photograph of Helen Keller. The basics of her life some of you will know. Helen Keller was born perfectly healthy in the year 1880. But at the age of 19 months, she contracted a fever, and when she emerged from it, she had lost her sight and her hearing. Her powers of speech, developing on schedule up until that time, atrophied at that point. For nearly the next 6 years, Helen Keller existed in a prison of darkness. And then her parents brought a Massachusetts teacher, Annie Sullivan, down to the Keller home in Tuscumbia, Alabama, to teach Helen to communicate by teaching her what words are, to teach her this by spelling words, certain words, over and over into the palm of her hand. All was confusion and rage. Imagine the difficulty of trying to reach into that black cave of her mind. Until famously one day at the water pump in the backyard of the Keller house, Annie Sullivan took Helen to the pump, put her hand into the running water, and simultaneously spelled the word water into that hand again and again. Whereupon Helen Keller got that the word being spelled into her hand and the substance flowing there were one and the same. And how moving it's been to me as I think about that story, to think that there should be such a thing as language, such a thing that we all have, that so corresponds to the world, that so gives us a way to represent it and what we feel about it, that there is this code for all of us saying that this means that the word W-A-T-E-R means the stuff flowing through the hand, that these two things, words and world, could almost magically be one and the same thing. So moving for me that one time I was in Alabama, and I went to Tuscumbia. Went there because I study American culture, went there because more than study American culture, I take pilgrimages to American places, going alone usually, finding the place, some spot, where this happened, where that happened, some location where walking down some humdrum American street at the site of some past event, I sometimes feel a silence come over the world, some cricket hum of dusk that penetrates my body like it's not there, like that. And so I went alone to Helen Keller's house there, and I was the only one there except for the two elderly women running the gift shop. And I went there, and I went through the house, went around to the backyard where the pump is, and feeling that I was all alone, and sensing how special this place is to me, this place where words and world come together, I looked at that pump, and maybe because my daughters were smaller then, about the height of the little pump, and because, you see, it was natural for me to hug things at that height, I bent down and, strange to say, vulnerable to say, embraced the pump. Embraced it, I guess, because it is for me a font of my own belief in words, in language. Embraced it when immediately I heard a loud voice from the house, from the gift shop where the two women worked, a voice that cried, "Hey, you!" Cried it in a southern accent, cried it in a way that made me feel I was in big trouble for hugging the pump. And then it said, this voice, and forgive the southern accent here, I'm only trying to get it right, "Here, come here. I want to give you a coupon for $2 off the Alabama Music Hall of Fame." So yes, my moment of inwardness, of cherished first principles, of what I believe, like so many such moments, did not translate, could not be shared. The woman at the gift shop did not know the emotion I felt. We live our lives inwardly, maybe especially at the most profound moments. No offense, so it is. But Helen Keller, there on the screen, she from that moment at the pump onwards did not live her life inwardly only, but reached out, made her mind contact the world. And what's moving to me is not only that she went to college, with Annie Sullivan there at her side, signing into Helen Keller's palm the content of all the lectures she heard. And not only the achievement of an amazing teacher, and Annie Sullivan was a real teacher, I assure you, I am no Annie Sullivan. And not only moving to me that Helen Keller went on to a storied career as a humanitarian and advocate for peace. Not only all of these things, but also, and most of all, this. Helen Keller used language with urgency, with necessity. Words, let's just say, mattered to her. She knew their power, the power to use them, the power of which ones she would pull out of the dark to say what was on her mind. And so I think of her when I think what it would be like for all of us to believe in words, to find the right words, the best words, to say what we feel, say what we mean. And let's just suppose that what we study, how we study, is a matter of that same urgency, that same almost necessity. What are our touchstones? They could be, they will be, for all of you, almost anything, the many things you will discover here and the many things that you already know, already care deeply about, even on this day of starting out, and that your Stanford education will help you explore or develop or even find, because it's not always easy to know what your deepest cares and intellectual passions are. The touchstone could be anything, but let's imagine with Rembrandt's picture on the screen that it's a painting. What does it mean for someone to say, I stare at this picture, I cannot not think of it, that it defines me, that it helps me understand who I am? What does that mean? It's not just a matter of knowing more. I know who Rembrandt is. That's just a form of what's called cultural literacy, a fluency with facts, with knowledge that some people use to lord their intelligence over others. And you know, it's not just a matter of taste, so-called. I know who Rembrandt is. That's just a form of what's called cultural capital, a way of saying, I know more about culture than another person, therefore I have more culture, more swank, more cultural capital than another person who, because I know more than they do, I'm bound to think is not as fancy as me, is below me. No, thank goodness it's not mainly those attitudes that are at stake when someone says, I like this painting. It's instead a feeling that I, you, all of us can hold certain things, maybe a painting, maybe a poem, maybe something else, maybe many things else, that absolutely matter to us. These things we care about give us our gravity, our seriousness, and our levity, our lightness. Without them, where we stand and where we go would be more random, more drifting. With them, like Helen Keller, like Rembrandt's Aristotle, we put our hand on what we believe. Stanford is a big place, but it's also a place where, all in the quiet of a personal reflection, you too can find what really matters to you. Thank you.